Hey everyone, welcome to a slightly different version of US Club Soccer on Facebook Live. We're having some technical difficulties with the platform that we use to go live today, so this is a pre-recorded message, but nonetheless, I'm super excited and honored to have a couple of the creators of the 11 plus warm-up program that so many clubs around the world use. These folks joining me today are the first one, Holly Silvers-Granelli, a longtime friend of U.S. Club Soccer, is a member of the U.S. Soccer medical team, a member of MLS's Medical Research Committee, and a member of the International Cartilage Research Society's Rehabilitation Committee. She's also a spokesperson for the American Physical Therapy Association's Task Force on ACL Prevention. Welcome, and thanks for joining us, Holly.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
And a new friend of U.S. Club Soccer with some great swag on his head already, Mario Bizzini, who is joining us from Zurich, Switzerland. Mario was with the FIFA Medical Research and Assessment Center for 12 years, and currently he's with the Human Performance Lab and Swiss Concussion Center. His research interests focus on prevention and rehabilitation of sports injuries in particular. Mario is also a deputy editor of the British Journal of Sports Medicine. Welcome. Thanks so much for joining us from afar, Mario.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
So I have some guiding questions because this is a recorded message that you're seeing now. We'll try to keep this conversation going as much as we can. So feel free as we post this to just provide questions. We're all kind of making these virtual connections work in whatever ways we can. So feel free to comment on any of the places where you're seeing this video, provide some questions, and we'll do our best to get some answers to you. But for now, let's kind of start with some guiding questions. I'll start with Holly first, and then Mario, you can jump in. Take me back to the creation of what was then called the FIFA 11 Plus. What were you seeing as a health expert that led you to create this warm-up program?
So there were a group of us that convened in Oslo was it December 2005, Mario? I believe, right? Yeah. So it's quite a long time ago now, a decade and a half. And that it was predicated off of some of our research we had done about 4 years prior. We developed a program called the PEP program, which was specific to ACL injury prevention. FIFA, about 2 to 3 years later, had compiled a program called the 11, which was not necessarily as successful as they would have liked. So there were a group of us, Mario, myself, and some other members, research members from the Oslo Traumatology Group. We got together in Oslo and we sort of repackaged the program to be specific or not specific to one particular soccer injury, to really address all soccer-related injuries. So the goal was a bit lofty in that how can we address every soccer injury that we see in a dynamic warm-up in 15 to 20 minutes. So we packaged this program together. Like I said, there were about 10 of us in the room for a long 3 days. And then we trialed it in Norway in women and young female players between the ages of 15 and 18. And that was under Torben Salegard. He was the lead investigator on that particular program. And it was very successful. We were really pleased with the outcome. There were a couple of other trials done after that to look at how compliance impacts the efficacy, so the ability for the program to actually decrease injury. And then part of my PhD dissertation was to look at how effective it was in men. So we trialed it in NCAA Division I and Division II universities, and we saw that, yes, it was indeed effective in both men and women.
Yeah, so if I just can add something, I think it was really a great international cooperation, and of course the example of the PEP program was great to have as a basis this idea of a package, a warm-up package, and then also the experiences from the Oslo Sport Trauma Center. They had a similar program for handball female players from Myklebust back also around beginning of 2000, and publication was 2003. So this was really some really important material and studies already available. And then these were the years where also some other preventive exercise were just starting to be investigated. As an example, the Nordic hamstrings. They was a student also in Oslo that began to have studies about this specific exercise, eccentric exercise in soccer players. And by the end, these were also components that were integrated in this program. So I would say it was a great international cooperation, and for sure, as Olli alluded to, the fact that it was very interesting also to see a basic program, because this is, as you know, it's a very basic program, but that can work both in young female and young men players. So, of course, with specific, let's say, age ranges and so forth, sub-elite level, but very interesting to see that it's a very valid tool to be used.
So that's a great point, because when you look at the posters that I think a lot of people and a lot of directors and clubs around the country have seen, there's a lot of exercises, but they look fairly simple. Can you, Mario, start with you? Can you kind of explain a little bit about the how you selected these exercises, how you selected these movements, with the science behind the order of them, and so forth?
Yeah, of course, as we stated, it was kind of a team effort to put together, and of course you need to finally have a choice about this exercise. But I think one of the key elements was to also, because it was a wish by let's say by the end, our big sponsor was at the time the former FIFA president, who was very keen to support these initiatives, was to have really simple exercises that could be done, let's say, on the pitch without the need of much equipment. So this was let's say, the philosophy behind. And then, of course, so there was already at that time quite a bit of scientific basis behind, let's say, these studies and experiences with the PEP, with the female handball program. Then there were certain exercises coming out, like the Nordic hamstring, that were implemented. Then there were a lot of knowledge about ACL, non-contact ACL prevention coming from the States, from Holly, from Tim Hewi's group, about the plyometric training to promote flex position, trunk stabilization, balance, agility. And these were, let's say, the key elements, with having at the top the promotion of neuromuscular control during basically all exercises. So maybe, Olli, you can follow up.
Yeah, no, we had a lot of really good data for, over a decade leading up to the development of this program, actually longer, probably since 1990, and actually some of Chuck Henning's work coming out of basketball, but particularly in the States, and the Oslo group had published quite a bit in the handball, looking at ACL injury prevention. So we had a lot of good science there. I said, like, our goal was lofty, so we wanted to expand that to all, not only ligament-related injury, but also soft tissue, and that's where the Nordic and Russian hamstring variant came into play, and there's a lot of good science backing that up. So I think, as Mario alluded to, the socioeconomics were really important as well, because this was going to every confederation in the world, some who have more resources than others. So we wanted to think about groups that did not necessarily have equipment and or monetary resources available to them. So this program can be done on the field with a ball and a couple of cones. So in terms of cost, really effective. And that goes into play with respect to compliance, because if you make the program too onerous, meaning with either equipment and or cost, then we will have fewer people completing the program. And obviously we have shown statistically that the more the program is done consistently, the better the results are in terms of injury mitigation. So I would say the major emphasis was neuromuscular control, body awareness in space. So again, this looks very basic, but the results are really staggering in terms of how effective it can be just by implementing some fundamental basic movements and being aware of your body in space with good neuromuscular control.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think we've done U.S. Club Soccer. We did a video just kind of going through with you at UCLA some of those movements of the 11 plus, and I think what a lot of people are surprised at is there are different variations of the 11 plus. So we have that one that we did, which I think a lot of people know, and that one, correct me if I'm wrong, is really kind of for 12 to 18-year-old players. But then we also have ones that are for kids, for referees, and for goalkeepers, particularly with shoulders. Holly, can you kind of start and maybe just go through just a quick overview on the differences between those?
Sure. I think the 11 plus for kids, I think that was like a beautiful addition. I was not completely involved in the development of that, but we had done something similar for the PEP program. We got a lot of questions about, oh, this is fantastic, but how do we adapt this for younger kids? And the focus is different. We have to think of a very different attention span. We have to think of it has to be more fun. Although it's sports specific, it has to be fun. The kids have to be engaged, and it has to be appropriate for their developmental age and developmental context. So that program, I think, was a really important addition. There's a lot of similarities, so there's a really nice flow from when young kids graduate from 11 plus for kids and can go into the full 11 plus program for teens and young adults. And Mario could perhaps speak to this more, but I think the addition, most people don't think about referees getting injured, and we have quite a few referees injuries. I've taken care of a couple of Major League Soccer referees in my career, but they definitely put on a lot of mileage, and there's definitely overuse injuries that need to be addressed. And then specific to the 11 plus for goalkeepers, obviously very different movement patterns in that particular player. They're not covering distance from a mileage perspective, but a lot of lateral movement, a lot of upper extremity movement. So that program is specific for upper extremity injury, for elbow, a shoulder, even hand and wrist. Incorporating a lot of the trunk stability work that is kind of a common thread throughout all of the 11 plus programs, but more specific to upper extremity injury for the goalkeeper.
Yes, I will try just to do some addition because Ollie has already covered a lot. But I will say for the 11 plus kids was really a challenging project, very, very fun and interesting project. Many people involved. We had several contributors in Europe, and also a multi-center study was conducted. And so actually similar, so there is a similar idea to have some activation at the beginning already with kind of fun. And then there are certain elements like skating hops, one leg balance, one leg hops, push-ups, Spider-Man's exercises, and then also some falling techniques. And these were also based on some epidemiological studies in young kids were realized, mostly European-based studies, because there was of course, the goal to focus these preventive exercises on the injury types in children, which is not really the same as in adolescents or adults. And then the similar idea was then for the referees. This is there has been several studies, unfortunately, only little published or presented at conferences, but also there was the goal to have this package, this program package, with some differentiation between referees and assistant referees. As you know, they have different movement patterns as well during the games, They also train a bit differently. So just think about the assistant refereeing doing shuffling movements on the side, and while the referees is maybe covering more diagonal or backwards running and twisting running. So the program tried to incorporate some basics for this, and there has been some very good research in Italy and in Brazil, which I hope it will be published soon. And so the 11 plus shoulder was really one of the last project was from a Brazilian group, came the initiative, focusing more on goalkeepers. There is really not so a lot on epidemiology of injuries in this group, but this was an attempt, and interestingly, one colleague from Saudi Arabia, Al Attar, has conducted an RCT recently, also showing an impact of this intervention or this preventative program to reduce upper extremity injuries in goalkeepers. So this is something that covers a little bit all these programs that they have been shown to be really effective to prevent a certain amount of injuries if implemented.
Yeah, thanks for the overview there and a little bit of the genesis behind creating those. Anybody watching, you're welcome to go on usclubsoccer.org. We have all of these exercises, the one for general use, the one for kids, for referees, and for shoulders, and then particularly targeting goalkeepers. So we have all that. You want to go on usclubsoccer.org, head over to the Players First section. You can find the 11 Plus webpage there, and then you can find the exercises within that page. Another question I have for you guys, and this is a little bit more general, but youth athletes are practicing a lot on their own right now. Taking ownership over their own development may be a fairly new concept for them. So an effective warm-up is probably overlooked in this scenario. How important is the warm-up, and not just the warm-up, but also the cool-down? I'll start with you, Holly.
Okay. Yeah, that's it. It's an interesting time right now, and I'd like to preface that, but I hope everyone's staying safe and applying to the World Health Organization's recommendations. And even my profession has completely changed. I'm doing everything via telehealth right now. So we're doing no contact to contact with respect to individuals, from a physical therapy perspective. And I have, a couple individuals right now that are post-op ACL, and we're being creative with the way we're adapting right now. But I would say the important thing to consider is that although you might be training on your own, it is important to be physiologically kind to your body. There has to be a work in, and there has to be some sort of cool down, depending on what indeed you're doing and then the space you have available to you to work. So I know a couple of the PCNL and academy teams locally here in Southern California have been instructing or doing some group setting from a sort of teletraining setting via Zoom and other avenues. But I was asking one of my athletes this past weekend, we did a telehealth visit, and I was asking, she's with a local academy here, and I said, what do you think the compliance is? And she said, it's about like 40-60. And I said, well, what direction? She's like 40, yes, 60, no. And she said, people are staying fit, but leaving it to their own devices in terms of individualizing what they're doing based on their needs, which I think is that's clever. I said, but they have to be doing that smartly. So I think the 11 plus in particular is like a really lovely warm-up that people can do on their own without equipment, basically in the confines of their backyard. That would be a good resource. I know Dawn Stott, former U.S. soccer with the women's national team, she's a brilliant addition to the team, and now she's with, I believe she's with the FA, but she's been posting some really interesting things on Twitter as well, things you can do in the backyard, left to, small space, things you can do that are smart. I think there's a lot of good resources, and we're happy to provide some resources after the talk on U.S. Club Soccer's page in terms of giving people some direction and in terms of how to do this safely. Again, warm-up is critical. Even if you're, not going to play a 90-minute game, it's important even when you're preparing just for basic movements so we can mitigate the risk of muscle strain and ligament sprain.
Yeah, just to to add something, I think, as Ollie said, it's some people say it's one of the most important part of the training. It's kind of prepare your body, and there is also really also good investigation showing this. So especially also on the 11 plus. By the way, it's many groups around the world as published on different areas, different topics, and this there was also an interest to see what are the effects or what can happen if you perform such exercises as a warm-up. And it has shown that first it is a valuable physiological, let's say, activation for the body, cardiovascular wise, and then it's also an optimal preparation for muscle activation through the body that then permits maybe even better start in the technical training. So I think just this idea of having a good preparation, maybe it can be, there are other examples, maybe 10, 15 minutes activation, but it's really worth spending the time on this, and especially promoting already there this concept of neuromuscular control while doing this exercise. So I think this is, I don't know what you think, Ollie, but I think this idea of preparation has really gained importance all over the years. Maybe 20 years ago it was like something strange, but now it's kind of in many places, many teams.
Absolutely. We've seen this incredible since over the course of my career, even transcending all sport. Wouldn't you agree, Mario? Like,
Yeah.
even in professional cycling and then sports, we didn't traditionally see that. But I think what's interesting now, trying to make sort of lemonade out of lemons, I think we have a unique opportunity here now when players are training individually, and there's a real ability to focus on their body position in space. So I think we can kind of use this as a time like to recommend programs like the 11 Plus or others where you are aware of what your body is doing in space. So you're not necessarily focused on the outcome of the ball. You're focused on body position, on joint angle. Is my knee dropping inward? Is my knee transcending over my toe? And I think this is kind of a unique time where an athlete is left on their own. They can kind of be aware of that as opposed to being aware of other players on the field or where the ball is in space.
And if I can add something, there are also some variation in the order of performing the parts. As an example, a colleague and a researcher from Australia has analyzed what happened if you do part 2 of the 11 plus after the normal training or technical training. So first doing part 1 and 3 as warm up, and then having the part 3 at the end, so the selective exercise. And they also showed quite an impressive, some impressive data, kind of similar of the original one. So maybe, of course, this can open another discussion, but yeah, maybe there are elements there that. And then maybe something else also. Maybe there has been in this last year this so-called Copenhagen adductor exercise. So and some groups has also integrated this exercise in the 11 plus program, also to promote warm up, also targeted the groin area. So I think there are different elements that can be incorporated, or maybe shifting some parts. But I think the overall idea stay the same, not to have to target this neuromuscular control and having a proper activation of the different muscle group and the body by the end. No?
I think just to add one more thing, I think one of the most interesting things we found as part of our NCAA Division 1, and Division 2 men's data is that the day that the program was utilized, the 11 plus was utilized, the injury rate was even lower. And I think that was one of the most fascinating findings I found in all, that particular project, because the impetus there, or the sort of the insinuation there, is that there's something neurologically happening to prepare this individual for the movements they are about to do. And I think that's really something impactful. And if we could kind of drive that message home to the players and the coaches, that this program does indeed work, and it works really well on the day of utilization. The other interesting finding we found is that the higher the compliance was, the more wins and fewer losses that we saw in the respective groups that utilized the program. So the groups that had high compliance, using the program over 2 times per week, statistically had more wins and fewer losses. So I don't think that we're necessarily creating better soccer players per se, but we're creating a more healthy soccer player, a more available soccer player, perhaps later in the season when repetitive overuse injuries start to settle in, and you'll see, people kind of a lot of injury rates spiking, perhaps as approaching postseason play. So I think those two things are important to consider too, about when we consider overall compliance, because I think that's something Mario and I would totally agree on this, that we still struggle globally on coaches adopting this program in a meaningful, consistent way, despite the science that, we have 15, 20 years of science now backing up these programs. We know they work. We know they work in men. We know they work in women. We know they work in kids. Referees, and with goalkeepers and shoulders. So I think my question always to the audience is, how can we perhaps improve our efforts in terms of dissemination, and that it becomes more sort of palatable? How do we kind of indoctrinate it back into the normal soccer and football repertoire? How does that become more seamless? And how can we do that better as scientists and clinicians? And how can we help you help yourselves?
We did get actually a couple of direct messages to us, so I want to address these. I have a couple of them. I'll address one to each of you, although obviously feel free to chime in if you have something to add. But one of them, I'll start with Mario. I know you were talking about the referees in particular, and kind of the different movements that you incorporate into that 11 plus variation for referees specifically, because some may be twisting, some may be putting in more mileage. But we got a question: what is the most common referee injury?
Yeah, so I was involved in some research about this, and there is also not so many studies, but some epidemiological studies. So from the acute, there is slight differences between referees and assistant referees. So referees, let's say number one acute injury is hamstring muscle lesion, and then you have calf muscle lesions, and then kind of similar some knee and ankle injuries. So then in the assistant referees, we have also hamstring coming, and then adductors, and then also calf. So these are from the acute injuries standpoint. And then even a little larger problem are the overuse injuries, which covers, let's say, the same areas. So let's say muscle will be hamstring, calf, adductors, and then we have also Achilles tendon and some patellar tendons, overuse type of injuries. So this is an area which has not been really investigated in detail. Also because so classically, if I think on the studies where I involved were more than 10 years ago, so there was a focus on and also the documentation system really focusing on acute injuries more, and just documenting overuse, yes and no. Nowadays, we have other tools like the Oslo overuse questionnaires, which then, if implementing it that way, will give a better appreciation of the amount of the overuse injuries. But I will say, also considering the length of the career of the referees, as an example, internationally, you can go up to 45 years of age. So of course, this duration of the career and it's responsible also for suffering from some overuse injuries. Yeah.
Right. And Holly, we have a question about the goalkeepers 11 plus program that are focusing shoulders. So, is this something that you would recommend that these goalkeepers do alongside their teammates who are doing the more general 11 plus program, or would you basically have them do both? Does it take the same time? We just had some kind of logistical questions about how to implement that for goalkeepers in conjunction with the rest of their teammates. Oh, Holly, I think I might. Holly, can you hear me? Mario, can you hear me?
Yes, still can. So
Mario, maybe let's.
this question.
Yeah, go ahead with that one.
Yeah, interesting question, but a difficult one because I think there is not really enough. So let's say enough investigation being performed on this. So I will say that I mean, of course, there are different type of routines for goalkeepers, and similar than the other one. The idea of such program is not that is not to say you have to throw everything away and just do this, but looking at what has what the studies have shown. So for sure, if let's say the usual routine does not incorporate, let's say, some specific shoulder, elbow, muscle warm up, maybe also connecting the trunk together, then I will say this is a valuable tool to incorporate in this routine. And so because let's say the original 11 plus is really for players. So of course, certain elements can be useful, some plyometrics, some agility, but is rather focusing on players. So maybe Holly can complement.
I'm not hearing you, Holly. Mario, are you hearing her?
I hear you, but not Holly.
Okay. The joys of technology.
Can happen.
Well, I think with that, Holly's still tinkering around. Let me give her a quick second. Holly, just I see your mouth moving, but I don't hear anything. So, all right. I think with that, let's close it out. I really appreciate it. You guys went above and beyond with your explanations and just lending your expertise here. So we really appreciate it. As we mentioned earlier in this recording, this was obviously supposed to be a Facebook Live, but we've been having some technical difficulties with the software. So appreciate everyone's patience with this. Appreciate those that submitted a couple of questions to us. Mario and Holly are fantastic resources to U.S. Club Soccer. We really appreciate them, and we will continue to tap into them and try to help us all get through these challenging times. So again, appreciate everyone joining in, and thanks so much, Holly and Mario. We will talk to you soon.
Thank you. Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.